Well, Greg, surprise, surprise, another close game with Northwestern and Nebraska in Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't anticipate that, I'm not sure what was wrong with you. But, yeah, it was a really good football game.
Yeah.
And I know Husker fans are disappointed because it didn't turn out right, but there were a lot of good things in that game, both ways, big plays being made by both sides, back-and-forth game. If you walked in here and you just were a college football fan, you didn't care who won, you would have been highly entertained last Saturday afternoon. Just unfortunately for Nebraska, came up short in that game, and Northwestern continues the head-scratching ability to come to Memorial Stadium and play really well. I mean, they've now won 3 out of 4 trips to Lincoln since Nebraska joined the league, and it's hard to explain, but kudos to them. They got it done.
And unfortunately, a couple of all too familiar storylines creeping in for Nebraska. Again, their inability to stop the run at times, and then, of course, turning the ball over. Let's start with the running game. And Justin Jackson, right away on that very first scoring drive for them, really showed that he was going to have a big day.
Sure did. And then the redshirt freshman Larkin had some big runs, including a couple big ones in overtime to get him down inside the 10-yard line. And so Nebraska, you're right, Nebraska's inability to control Northwestern's running game was troublesome. And yet, you look at the final box score for last week's game for Bob Diaco's defense, Northwestern only converts 1 of 11 third downs and wins the game. Usually when you held somebody on 1 of 11 on third downs, that's a really good sign. Your defense got a bunch of stops and got off the field. Northwestern went for it on 4th down a couple of times and converted those. But, yeah, you've got to be able to stop the run game. And Justin Jackson had gone into that game only averaging around 80 yards a game, and yet he kind of broke loose against the Huskers. And then to your second point, Tanner Lee, the interception bug came back. 3 picks that he threw in the game last week. And now the last one, which was the killer because Nebraska was driving up 7. They're inside the red zone. He gets hit as he throws. The ball flutters and gets picked off. That one maybe wasn't totally his fault, but three picks in a game, that's hard for anybody to overcome, and that was too bad that kind of reared its ugly head again.
And that's the worst part for Husker fans is they'd like to say, oh, yeah, 3 picks in a game. We haven't seen that. Oh, wait a minute. We've seen a lot of that, unfortunately, this year.
Yeah, I mean, he'd gone through a nice stretch without throwing a pick. I think he was over 125 pass attempts without throwing a pick until last week. And it kind of crept back into the game for him. You hope it doesn't shake his confidence. You know, I had somebody this week say, well, you're probably just ready for this year to be over. I'm like, well, no, wait a minute. There's 3 football games left. That's 25% of the season is still yet to be played for Nebraska.
Yeah.
But you hope that last week didn't shake Tanner's confidence for these last 3 games because they're going to certainly need him to play well to try to get some wins here late in the year to become bowl eligible.
And you mentioned there were plenty of positives on both sides of the football for Nebraska. And one of the things that Tanner Lee did well is he spread the ball around quite effectively.
And that's kind of been Nebraska's mantra all year. A lot of different guys making catches. We saw Jack Stoll make 3 catches, including the touchdown catch. The redshirt freshman tight end from Colorado. It was good to see him get involved in the game where Tyler Hoppus had been the big target from that spot the week before at Purdue. Jack Stoll stepped up and made some big catches for Nebraska. J.D. Spielman continues to play at a very high level. Stanley Morgan, obviously, DeMornay Pearsonell, those guys all certainly involved in the pass game for the Huskers. So, yeah, spreading it around, getting a lot of people involved in the offense. But yeah, when you look back at that game in its whole, the offense only managed 17 points because the defense got the pick 6 for one of the scores. So that offense throughout the game, only 17 points. You're not going to win a lot of Big Ten games only putting 17 points on the board.
I was going to bring that up next, Greg. After Marcus Newby makes that interception, returns it for a touchdown, Nebraska's up 21-17. Then the offense goes on an 18-play drive. They get it down 1st and 10 from the 11 and have to settle for a field goal.
Yeah, chewed up 9 minutes of the third quarter clock with that drive. And you end up outscoring Northwestern in that quarter 10-0. And yet you felt like, boy, we do all those really wonderful things, and we lead by a touchdown. And you just didn't put Northwestern away at that point in time in the game. And that drive was reminiscent of what we saw at Purdue. Good drives between the 20s, stall out, have to settle for 3. And, there are just times that you have to try to put somebody away. Now, that drive would have been nice to stick that in the end zone and get up 2 scores, or then the drive that I referenced earlier where they're down inside the 20 with about 11 minutes to go, and then Tanner gets picked off. You had a chance to really put some space in the game and win it right there. Huskers allowed Northwestern to hang around, and we know how it ended.
And we've seen a lot of times this year, Greg, where Nebraska, having to play from behind, had to throw the football and had to rely on Tanner Lee's arm. Well, that wasn't the case in this game. It was a close game, and in fact, Nebraska had the lead much of it in the second half, but yet seemed to really go away from the running game when they could have been eating up some more time.
Yeah, they did, and they just couldn't get big chunks of yards. The only big chunk play was the jet sweep to Spielman, who goes for 40, which, by the way, that 40-yard carry was the longest rush of the season for Nebraska. Let me throw something at you that's just going to stagger Husker fans and knock you to the knees. Nebraska, through 9 football games, only has 8 rushing touchdowns on the year.
Wow.
And they haven't had a rushing touchdown since Illinois.
Oh, my gosh.
So 4.5 games, Nebraska does not. The Nebraska Cornhuskers, one of college football's great rushing programs of all time, has 8 rushing touchdowns and not one in 4.5 games.
Talk about running the football. That's all Northwestern did in overtime. 7 straight running plays. And basically they said, hey, try to stop us.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Nebraska had a really good goal line stand going there. And I went back and I rewatched the game earlier this week, and Matt Millen was doing the color commentary for BTN, and Nebraska stuffed the third down play, and so it's 4th and goal ball inside the 1. And Matt Millen's going, well, you got to get the points here. You got to kick. And at the game, watching the sideline, I didn't get the sense that that's what they were going to do. I figured they were going to go for it right there to try to get 7 points, and they just got Thorson over the goal line with the push into the end zone. So I'm proud of Nebraska's defense because it was 1st and goal at the 2, and it took them 4 snaps to barely get that thing across the goal line. So Nebraska really fought hard. It was just a really tough go for the offense in overtime, and that was the 3rd overtime game for Nebraska under Mike Riley, Jeff. Miami in year 1, Wisconsin in year 2, and then Northwestern last week. Nebraska has failed to score a point in any of those 3 overtimes, and their total offense in those 3 overtimes, 0 yards. I mean, it's just been puzzling, and it goes back to this offense hasn't really been able to establish an identity. They can't really figure out what they want to be and can't find a couple of plays they can rely on, and that's an issue as you're now into year 3 of a program.
Well, and you start incomplete pass, 10-yard sack on your first 2 plays in overtime, needing a touchdown. You got to throw the playbook out the window at that point.
Absolutely. And the second down play is the one that I think has caused me some heartburn this week. The screen pass, which Nebraska just has not been a very good screen team. You throw the incompletion on first down. To me, that's where you have to try to run it.
Yeah.
And get 3-4 yards on that play and set up 3rd and 6 or 7, knowing you're going to have to go for it, knowing that you have to score a touchdown to keep this thing going, to try to set up the screen pass. And that was the only sack of the game, was right there on that second down play, and that really threw Nebraska off. And at that point, you felt like, yep, it's probably going to be over, and the Cats are going to win this thing.
All right, we'll turn the page now. You go to TCF Bank Stadium in Minneapolis tomorrow to play the Gophers, 11 o'clock at a game on ESPN 99.1 here in Sioux Falls. What a difference a year makes, Greg. These 2 teams, 7-2 when they met last year, just about a year ago this weekend. Big difference for the Gophers and the Huskers this year.
Yeah, I would say both are disappointed. Nebraska certainly didn't think they would be sitting here at 4-5 heading into this game. And the Gophers, when I looked at their schedule in the offseason, I thought they would have 6 wins right now. I knew their schedule was going to be tough at the end with Nebraska. Then they play Northwestern and Wisconsin to close it, and then last week they had Michigan. So really 4 straight really tough games for them. You had a feeling they better get themselves to 6 before now. Well, they didn't do it. They lost to Maryland and Purdue, a couple of games that you would have thought during the offseason that those would be wins. They've struggled at the quarterback position.
Yeah.
They cannot really find good play there. Connor Rhoda is a 5th-year senior who's been okay for them. Demery Croft is who they've gone with the last couple of weeks. He's a sophomore, a little bit more mobile. He can run a little bit, but he's not very accurate at all throwing the football. So they just have struggled. Defensively, they'll fight. They'll play hard. They'll do a lot of those things well, but they just have had a hard time getting many points on the board. And yet, P.J. Fleck has been able to find a way to keep them in most games. Michigan got away from them last week. And here's how, Jeff, they've been able to hang in games. They're one of the least penalized teams in the country, so they do a good job of that. And they're +4 on the year on the turnover margin. So they win that battle most weeks. Well, if you do those 2 things, you can hang in a lot of games, and that's what they've done. And that's what they're going to try to do tomorrow, force Nebraska to make some mistakes. hope to put together a couple of good drives offensively and try to steal one from Nebraska.
And the problem with their lack of confidence in their passing game, they only threw it 12 times against Michigan, at least that's all Croft threw it, is you're wasting one of the best talents in the Big Ten in Tyler Johnson.
He's pretty good, and people are kind of locked up on him a little bit, knowing that that's the best target for them to go to. So if you're Nebraska, I like this matchup. I like Nebraska's defense putting the clamps on the Gophers tomorrow. To me, I don't see that offense being able to 2, 3, 4 times a game be able to drive at 80 yards on Nebraska's defense. So if you can avoid the big mistake and make them go the distance, I think you can do a really good job of limiting their points in this game. So from that standpoint, I like the matchup. I don't like it as much on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Northwestern or Minnesota's best part of their defense has been defending the pass. And then it's great against the run. Well, Nebraska hasn't been very good running the football. They've been better throwing it. So the strengths and weaknesses kind of match up with each other on that side of the ball tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because, you're coming off a team that, again, it was Michigan, but you're still coming off a team that gave up over 370 yards on the ground. You would think maybe there'd be a chance to exploit that.
I know you would, but that's just not been something Nebraska's been able to do all year long. And it's really concerning. You hear Mike Roddy at his press conference on Monday going, well, we need to identify a couple of plays to hang our running plays to hang our hat on. Well, this is week 10.
Right.
I mean, I just you hear that and you're kind of like, well, how have you not been able to find that yet? And that's frustrating. It's frustrating to Husker fans, and I get it. I understand that I'm frustrated by it.
Mm-hmm.
That this program has just not been able to get a solid running game. Now, maybe Jalen Bradley's back tomorrow. He's practiced a little bit this week. He gave that running game a bit of a spark at Purdue, sprained the ankle late in the Purdue game, but he might be able to go tomorrow against the Gophers, so maybe he can supply a little spark to that running game.